Going through my work in preparation for this mentorship program and studying the portrait photographer's work afresh. So it's like I kind of came to an halt, stopped, and looked at things that I felt these are the aspects that I would like to bring across. And the one thing I realized, if you want to be a good people photographer, you have to capture pictures that are more than just surface deep. That you have to look at creating pictures that are, if it's about beauty, if it's about surface depth, if you are photographing a beauty shot, a model, I understand that you're not always going to get the emotion and the intentional depth in those pictures because it's really about showcasing superficial beauty. But at the same time, you want to create mood in your work. And so mood and emotional depth goes hand in hand. And as I was asking Rob, I didn't get an answer from him earlier on. You get to a point when you are more experienced and you shoot more portraits, and particularly I shoot a lot of portraits because it's my sideline income. I earn extra income from portrait photography. I focus a lot on executive and company portraits. I cover a lot of events as of late because they pay well. And not that you capture anything, I think, significant when you capture events. It's just you just capture the day. You are a reporter and you capture the day. And I don't think you can expect capturing the same in-depth portraits that you would when you have your own portrait session. But looking at my work, I thought, gee, Danie, there's something lacking in a lot of your work. And even though I teach on posing, I teach on composition, I teach on lighting, and by now I have about 5 or 6 different lighting setups that just works, that I always know this is the result I'm going to get. I don't even think about it. I set up the lights. Sometimes I don't even check the exposure. It's almost on the money straight away because I've done it so many times. But I felt the one thing I would like to really, really install in our portrait mentees photography is the ability to capture depth and emotion and mood. Anything from you guys? Anything from your side, Rob? I know you can sometimes be philosophical like me.
I don't know so much about philosophical, but yeah, look, I mean, I think it's it's difficult to get that emotion sometimes. It really is. And once you've been shooting beauty, like I've been shooting lately, it sort of, as you said earlier, you sort of fall into a rut where it's paint by numbers. You just click, 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 and get it done. And when you get back and you look at what you've done, you sort of think, wow, I could have done better. So yeah, look, I mean, there's been a lot of insights. I mean, when we chatted earlier in the week, and I'm also looking at other portrait photographers differently and seeing what they do and how they do it. And I'm starting to see things that I've never seen before. So I'm really looking forward to this and really looking forward to getting to to becoming better at it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, you won't believe me, but I feel exactly the same as you. You guys, and for those of you who don't know about the program, obviously, many of you just know that we are running this program, and I know a lot of you would love to do it, but you just don't have the time or the resources this year to do it, and that's why not more people signed up. And obviously, we also couldn't take more. I'm maxed out in terms of the amount of people I can handle. But I've given the guys an assignment to photograph 50 headshots, head and shoulder pictures, with the sole purpose just to train them to find different expressions. So they are only allowed to take a maximum of 5 head and shoulder portraits of one person. In other words, they'll have to photograph at least 10 people. And then I made it even more difficult by saying, well, you have to photograph 3 strangers. So 2 or 3 strangers. In other words, to force people, like Brian Smith says, if you're uncomfortable taking pictures of people, he said, well, go out and photograph 50 strangers and try to capture something about who they are. And I didn't actually realize when I made the assignment how much toll it's going to take on the guys, because I already had people contacting me and say, listen, this is going to be overwhelming. And I realized it's an overwhelming program. And on top of it, the first big assignment I gave the mentees was to find 5 photographers. We provided a great list, but obviously they could also add people from their own list. And then pin 50 images of each one of those photographers' work, pictures they like and resonate with. And you might think it's madness. I mean, the program only started last week, and already by end of April, I want 50 headshots. And by this time already, we are looking at those Pinterest boards, but I did give the guys a bit of I postponed the due date. I think we are really tough on you guys, so we don't want to run it like a military boot camp. But the sole purpose was to affect your visual vocabulary, to force you to look at great portraits. Because those photographers that we provided on the list, they don't need further curating. They're all top photographers. And even among the other mentees who added some of their own names, those are all well-recognized, brilliant portrait photographers that we can all learn from. And in the program, I mentioned this, and Rosalie, you would remember how much I focused in the Developing a Visual Vocabulary series. That first time I presented, when it was the creative series, when it was still called, it was something about vision, I can't remember, expanding your vision. That's what it was called. And one of the tools I gave the guys is go study photographers' work. Go find photographers whose work makes you happy. When you look at it, it makes you feel something, either happy or sad, whether it fills you with melancholy or with happiness, or puts a smile on your face, or just makes you happy looking at that work. You know you are on the right track. And so that's the point with that series, Hunt. I know somebody like yourself, Hunter, is an experienced designer. She's now abdicated from design. She's no longer doing it. But design will always be part of her life, because that's what she is. She's a visual person. The same with somebody like Tamron, who's a graphic designer and one of our interns. She's a very, very visual person. And it's much easier for people who are that visual, who trained visually, to see. But the interesting thing is, I've seen a lot of graphic designers and overall just people from the design field who don't understand the importance of mood and atmosphere. And I want to just put up this particular definition as a starting point. I said early on, we're going to run exactly the same program than the one I run for the basic photography course. And I decided earlier today, listen, I'm not going to finish with it. And I also don't want to do a half-baked project, because I've obviously been busy with redoing this whole presentation now over a couple of months. And I was still looking for very particular visual examples that I actually have to go shoot to complete the presentation. But I'm still going to bring some of those aspects through. And during the mentorship program, and even for the pro members who are sitting in tonight, and even the guys from Sasol, hello guys, I see Mpo's joining us. I see a couple of guys from it seems only Mpo is here. I can't see anybody else. But even for those guys from the Sasol program that we invited to just sit in tonight as observers, we want you to understand that there's something that we miss out on if we just look at pictures surface deep. And I'm just going to bring up this very particular quote or definition, and this is my definition on what is portrait photography. And you guys can see that I've actually added one more element to the one that you guys learned in the basic course. And that is I brought in color. And I'm going to talk about color tonight. I'm going to talk about all these aspects. So I've just did a loose selection of some of my images, some of it commercial work, some of it just some of my favorite work, and some of them just pictures from workshops and so forth that we are going to discuss based on this particular definition. But I'm going to read it for you, and then I'm going to explain just very shortly how it works and how you should see this definition and how you should understand how this definition will make you understand portrait photography and the process of portrait photography. And if there was ever a definition that I think my students should memorize, and particularly the mentees, I'd love you guys to memorize this, because this will just set you ahead of the pack, because you will have this in the back of your mind all the time when you shoot. So portrait photography is the art of capturing someone's personality, character, or features by using light, color, background, composition, pose, and expression. So what do we mean when we say that portrait photography is the art of capturing someone's personality and character? How do you guys understand that? It doesn't have to be a very academic answer, guys. I just want something.
Understand it as if your photos and pictures have to have feeling in it, not just a blank picture of someone. It has to have feeling and meaning.
Okay, so Lucius perfectly says it has to have feeling and meaning. And yeah, you're on the right track there, Lucius. And so when you photograph somebody's personality, and I'm making a short tutorial of this will go into the Portrait Mentorship portal, and I will also post it on the pro group as well as to the guys of Sussel. But personality is who they are. In other words, whether consider, for example, warmth, confidence, humor, calmness, whether they're edgy. For example, a relaxed laugh versus a very steady or contemplative gaze. And your job is to get something real to the surface, even if it's just a sliver. Just get that something, extract that something about the person's personality that you pick up. And interestingly, in my first tutorial about the headshots that I wrote, I don't know how many of you guys actually read the tutorial on headshots that I put out for the mentees. I mentioned there that sometimes after you've taken a picture, there's a moment that something happens. And very often as photographers, we take one shot after the other. We don't wait, sitting with the camera and wait for that one expression that's just exactly the expression we want. And often I found that the moment I start talking to the person, I start getting to know this person I'm photographing, showing interest in them. Like the great Alfred Eisenstadt said, it is more important to click with people than to click the shutter. And so what I found consistently in my own photography is that very often when I get to that point where I connect with the personality, where I enjoy the subject's personality, that's when I get the shot. And remember, a lot of us are going to do commercial work. A lot of us are going to do paint by numbers, are going to do beauty shots for a model agency. The other day, we shot 47 models in a week's time. Crazy for a model agency. And there was barely time to really get to know the models. I mean, there was just no time. It was paint by numbers. But they were after beauty shots. They were after model poses. They were after showing the beauty of the person. And so the other aspect that you have to consider is the character, is how they carry themselves. In other words, some people, when they walk into the room, there's a certain presence. Yesterday, Amanda and I went to we went to have a breakfast together. Wednesday's typically our day off. And so we sat in this particular restaurant pub, and Victor Matfield walked in, and immediately you could pick up the charisma. Immediately his confidence, and I mean the fact that he's been playing rugby at that level and he's being interviewed, and he's also a rugby commentator. I mean, the guy is huge, not only in terms of his actual size, but in terms of his personality. But he walked in and he carried a certain amount of authority, even though he wasn't on the rugby field. He wasn't playing for the Bulls or for the Boks. He was just having a meeting with, seemed like a business meeting. And I really thought about the charisma he had. And I thought to myself, he's such a charismatic person. So the character is how these people carry themselves. And for example, if you photograph a CEO, from my personal experience, sometimes I photographed some really, really big CEOs. I'm talking about CEOs of huge companies, huge bodies, that were just not comfortable in front of the camera. They just didn't know how to carry themselves into the camera. Their shoulders would hang, and they were typically afraid of the camera. It was like they were intimidated by the camera. And then other times I photographed normal people who had this presence and who knew how to project themselves into the lens. And that's pretty important to try to capture that, or to leverage off what they give you. And the other thing is, an artist will, for example, provide you with certain energy. A CEO will provide you with authority and with control. And this is where you start working on what they give you. This is where you start focusing on trying to let that vibe, whatever they bring, to bring it out and capture it. And very often we make the mistake in not studying people. We don't sit back and look at their demeanor. And this is the big point I want to bring across. And please, Delisa, I would love you to just post, to get this audio transcription to me so I can also turn it into a more solid tutorial, ASAP. So the point is, you would want to work off what they give you, but you want to refine instead of change everything. And sometimes somebody walks in and you just change the person. You just say, go stand there, do this. And you don't sit back and look at this person intentfully and see what this person is bringing to the party. We just start shooting. And that's often what happens with when you shoot beauty, when you shoot models. We focus so much on the superficial beauty. Not that there's anything wrong with it, guys. Some of my best work are beauty portraits. And I love the glamour of beauty portraits, by the way. There's nothing wrong with it. But because I do get the opportunity to photograph CEOs and executives, especially as of late, I just realized I would want to photograph them in such a way that I can show who they are, that they are assertive, that they are powerful, but that they are friendly. They are not untouchable. You can reach them. The one CEO I photographed asked me specific two things. He said to me, Danie, he said, I am involved in business. He was head of a major corporation in Africa. And he said to me, I want you to photograph me as the head of a business, as a businessman, but also as an entrepreneur and also as a mentor. I want you to show me. I said to him then, oh, you want me to show you in an assertive way and also in an approachable way? And he said to me exactly that. And so I worked a lot with his hands. So I had very strong, powerful compositions that I made of him. But I started letting him talk in front of the camera as if he's presenting something to young entrepreneurs, to young mentees. And I had him just use his hands as he was doing a presentation. And then I just got so much from him. But the moment that I started talking to him about his personal life, so I realized very early on in the shoot that he had a son, a young boy, which was, I think, between 2 and 3 years old. And the moment I started asking him questions about his son, so do you enjoy your son? Do you have a lot of fun? He just softened up a little bit. And he gave me, at those moments, he gave me some of my favorite shots. And just the fact that I was interested in his life, and that I actually paid attention when I asked him questions, and I could later relate some of those questions back to him, opened him up to me, and I just had a wonderful session, even though I was very intimidated by this man when he walked in, because I haven't done that kind of photography for ages. And I did speak about that particular shoot in previous sessions as well. So the point is, when you get to photograph people, try to capture their soul, try to capture something that's more meaningful. And if it's beauty photography, there's other ways to capture something where you can feel something than just focusing on that. The other aspect about it is, remember, we say by capturing someone's personality, character, or features. So features is basically the surface layer. That's the part that we see. That's almost the superficial side. That's the beauty side. And if you are into, for example, beauty photography, fashion photography, then those details matter. And so think of it as features, as anything to do with beauty and with whatever you're trying to sell in the work. If you want to sell the beauty of a person, that this is a really beautiful model, want to sell the makeup that she's wearing, want to sell the clothes that he or she is wearing, that's where that part comes in. So basically, these three words, personality, character, and features, summarize almost any kind of person you are ever going to photograph. So the other thing is, so if you just think of features, think of bone structure, think of eyes, think of skin, think of how they bolt, and work with that. So again, in other words, we're not leaving the beauty and fashion photographers out of this definition, because this is very much part of what we do. And we photograph these three aspects about people, their personality, character, or features, by making use of certain tools. And the first tool is lighting. So if I open, for example, my Lightroom up here. So I just want to get my Lightroom open here. And guys, my computer for some reason is so damn slow. I hope it's not going to take forever. I've been editing. I actually edited until 12 o'clock yesterday morning, because I had to complete a job I've done for commercial clients. Okay, so let's carry on with that definition. And I'm currently busy just going through some of my work. So I'm setting up a commercial portfolio, and for my own brand. And so these are some of the pictures I chose a couple of weeks ago. By the way, Rob's daughter appears in at least two of these pictures here. There's more of her because I get a whole other gallery that I'm also utilizing. And then, yeah, so the point I wanted to make is that when you photograph somebody, you focus on, first of all, the person or the person's features. So those are the most important aspects starting out. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with beauty photography. There's nothing wrong when you're photographing a person for the sole purpose of capturing beauty. Basically, the thing is the tools we're going to use. So photographing someone's personality, character, or features, that has to do with the person. Then comes the tools we are using, by using light, color, background, composition, pose, and expression. And so what is light? Obviously, you guys know from all my previous classes, light is the primary agent for mood. If you want to capture mood, the thing you always go for first, the first aspect you always consider is, what kind of lighting am I going to use? I don't know, those of you in the mentorship program, when I've put out Andrew Zuckerman's work, and I don't know if it's Andrew Zuckerman, I've got no idea how to pronounce it properly. So if I do it wrongly, my apologies. But Did you realize these high key portraits from that book Wisdom that I quoted still has mood, even though we generally think that high key isn't moody enough. But I just looked at the way it captures texture and expression and focusing on those two aspects to bring out mood. And I have tried it now a number of times where I shot a fairly high key picture, but I'm trying to create a certain mood in that picture, certain feeling, in other words. So light is always the first and the primary agent of mood. Dark chiaroscuro lighting versus high key. So those are the two opposites we are using. And then obviously your standard exposures, your standard basic exposures, where you go for just an accurate photograph. But light sets the mood above anything else. And when you ever consider taking a picture, the first thing you should ask yourself, what is it I'm trying to say with this picture, and how am I going to light it to show what I want to show? So I've seen, for example, Jacques, in some of your portraits you posted on the group, there's some really nice emotional photos. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, I understand why you did this a low-key, and I know Rob is besotted with low-key photography anyway. But I was talking to Edinette earlier today. I was giving her some advice on photographers she were studying. And I said to her, well, go look at the work of Paolo Roversi and Sarah Moon, because she was looking at that kind of thing, the pictorialist movement. And sometimes you get photographers who photograph beautiful, ethereal kind of pictures. In other words, pictures that are bright and angelic, but you still feel something. And so light is your first aspect when you create, that you have to think about where am I going to put my subject if you are using natural light, or how am I going to light my subject if you are using your own lighting system. Secondly, that goes hand in hand, is color. Now, color is very deceptive, because a lot of photographers think that color has to do with, for example, color is color, and color is so damn boring. There's this guy, I think it's Ted Grant, who said, when you photograph people in color, you photograph their clothes, but when you photograph them in black and white, you photograph their souls. But we're no longer bound by that rule as much, because we are shooting people in color, because we are using RAW as our primary file. It means that whether I've set my camera to monochrome or to black and white, I capture a color image, because I can do far better black and white conversions if I leverage off color. And so the purpose of light, obviously, if you look at this picture, for example, now this is just a beauty shot. It's not anything to do with mood. But if you look at this photograph, for example, and you just see, there's a certain mood, there's a certain feeling because of the shadows and the use of lighting. And if I look at this photograph, there's a certain look and feeling. It's a little bit of a Whoopi Goldberg kind of vibe. And when I look at this picture, it's clearly model and beauty photography. It's clearly great poses and model poses. But the moment we start moving towards the darker side of these pictures, having a shadow in there, you can see that there's something else. So a very simple, otherwise very standard picture can become more interesting when I push the contrast in here, and I, for example, then turn it into a black and white, because that shadow cast becomes a very nice secondary element. Is this a great example? No, but a picture like this does leave that feeling of that ominous feeling, Dexter vibes. That's exactly what I wanted to create when I took this picture. I wanted, because he's a hot kitchen chef. In other words, hot kitchen chefs mean steaks and hot meals and sharp knives all the time. And I obviously wanted to create that ominous kind of feeling with these shots. And even this wry smile, him just curling up his one lip, that was orchestrated and encouraged by me. So I created this image. I shot it with a mid-gray backdrop, which I often do. Very often I'll put a light into the backdrop. Sometimes I'll add a spotlight in Lightroom afterwards to create depth. I love portraits with depth where the background actually has a say. And we're going to talk about background now. And very often photographers get so carried away by just shooting black backdrops that it becomes boring and there's no depth in the shot. So with a lot of my photography, often you'll find that kind of halo, and this picture is unedited. So this is kind of out of camera. And you can see I've definitely put a bit of a background light into create backdrop, but I'm going to talk about background now. We're still with light and color as the primary agents of mood. But the big mistake we make is we think, well, light's the only primary agent for mood, and I'm anyway shooting black and white, and not knowing that when I shoot in black and white, or because I'm shooting raw, it means that I can push my black and white edits to the next level by leveraging off that color. So for example, if you look at this picture here of Voltamada, it's my wife's brother. And I'm just going to turn this into just a standard black and white. So I'm just turning this into a black and white like we have over here. You know, now immediately we have a bit of soul in the picture. I don't think there was anything wrong with that color image. I just want to maybe create a virtual copy and work off the virtual copy so that we can compare the two afterwards. But when I jump into Adobe Monochrome here, and I darken the exposure a little bit. So now I feel there's quite a bit of, it just feels slightly different, but it's not there because there's not enough contrast on him. So I can just obviously add a little bit of light on his face using, and you see I always do this. I'm just going to add a little bit more light on his face like I'm doing like here. So very often when I bring the pictures back into Lightroom from Evoto, because I use Evoto as for my retouching, I would very often just bring in another spotlight in the face just to create a little bit three-dimensionality on the face. And so even though he wore a black suit, that black suit is now very much, that blue suit is now very much black. I can just by targeting my blue channel lift the blue colors a little bit. So you see suddenly I have a lot more control with this. And the big mistake we make is we think, well, black and white is for black and white. When you look at this picture of Fuad, this was one of my favorite shoots in a long time, Rob. I absolutely enjoyed shooting this man. I don't know if you guys still remember that shoot. I think you were also there, Danie. And so I mean, here, to be honest with you, what's your choice? Would you guys choose the color or the black and white? Which photo would you choose?
I'll go black and white. You know that.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the black and white as well.
But what's wrong with the color? Doesn't the emotion and that burgundy dark red carries a certain feel with it? So to be honest with you, I can't decide. I like both. I really like that red and that very simple gray because he's just such a strong presence, and I do like the color for this image because to me the color creates a different depth. But the great thing is, and the problem with this picture is, if I target the red he's wearing, if I'm not going to do like a selection in Photoshop and I just jump into the brightness and I target the red here, I also target the face because there's obviously a lot of the same color in his face. So one thing you guys have to consider, and this is very important, when you look at my definition, it is understanding that color also controls black and white. So that's why in my client communications, I tell the clients to wear blue or sometimes green because you don't get red or green in the skin tone. In other words, if the person wears a color that's opposite than the skin tone, I can target the skin tone more efficiently in editing. So I can create stronger black and whites. For example, if I decide this picture is going to go black and white like this picture, because the problem is there's a red in his skin or orange in his skin, and there's obviously he's wearing red. And if I target this black and white photograph here, and I decide I'm going to target this particular color, I should have thought about choosing this top from the onset if I wanted to do a black and white shot. Not that it bothers me. I like the fact that it's so dark here and that it came out this dark. But say, for example, I wanted to create extra contrast. The key to this is I should have had him wear green or blue, meaning that if I do target this color, that I'm not, you see, the moment I push up this, his clothes, the moment I push it up, I'm also affecting the skin tone. And that's where a lot of photographers don't get it. If you look at this picture of Amanda, this is Rob's background, by the way. By the way, Rob, we bought a green one that you had because I thought it's lacquer for black and white, and particularly for our fine art shoots that's coming up. You see, if I target the yellow here of the background, I also target Amanda's face. So just take that into account. So in this case, I like the fact that it's analogous color scheme, that you're working with the orange and the yellow, which are living next to each other in the color wheel. It's a very simple, neutral palette to work with. But the big mistake we make, we don't consider color when we are shooting portraits. We just don't consider that. And so again, getting back to my definition, is portrait photography is capturing someone's personality, character, or features by using light, color. So light and color should be almost synonymous to you. Light first, color second, and then background. So background we use not only because we need a background for the person, but we want to choose backgrounds based on whether I'm creating depth. And so I don't know about many of you guys. This picture of Amanda was shot against a very dark gray backdrop, but because we didn't put any light on it, it came out black, almost black, like a, but you can see it's slightly brighter than the top she's wearing, which is a good thing, but at least there's a little bit of separation there. She's not really blending into the backdrop. But sometimes I get so damn bored of photographers who simply just put a person against a black background and they don't think about depth. So the one thing I want to bring across, and you know this guy very well, Rob, you and I shot him together, and I'm really happy with these edits, how I was able to, in the editing, create extra depth by putting a vignette in the backdrop and just by brightening up the area around his shoulders. Now, obviously, some of this was done in the camera, in the studio, and some of it was done in editing, where you basically select this area here and you brighten it up in Lightroom and using a radial mask, and then you just intersect the mask with the background and you subtract the subject for a good separation. But the fact that I did get this very nice backdrop over here, this very nice vignette, creates a little bit of extra depth. And whether you present this picture in color or black and white, and I want to challenge you guys who always say black and white, but you don't understand color. So a lot of times that photographers just never go into color because they don't understand it. And so you should at least know your color wheel. You should at least know what colors work together. A big revelation for me a couple of years ago, I always worked with complementary colors, always been my thing. And the moment we started pushing beauty photography, and I watched one of Lindsay Adler's tutorials, I just saw how, and it's so interesting that I never actually really paid attention, but when you look at beauty photography, finding a color that are similar to the skin tone, that are not completely away. So using either a beige backdrop, and you can see in a lot of my work, I use beige. We use beige because beige is actually, complementing the skin, and you don't fight. It's a very friendly analogous color, in other words, sitting right next to the skin tone or right with the skin tone, and something that I should have paid more attention to when I started out years ago. So you just browse through this and you can see how beautiful those browns are complementing all the skin tone. With all the beauty shoots, you can see that how we have used that brown color. And in a lot of my photography, I am using the beige backdrop, and sometimes we put a bit of a so you, for these muted backdrops, emphasize the subject. They're not fighting the subject. So the other big mistake we make is we choose backgrounds that are fighting, that are not adding to that kind of photo. And the one thing I really picked up over the years is that you should always think of your background and of the color of the background whenever you photograph anything. So when you look at, for example, these kind of shots, and I'm just trying to find a good beige backdrop here. Interesting, I didn't select a single one because I just have hundreds of them that we're using for beauty photography. And if I just jump to just one of our more regular models, I quickly want to get one here. These are other edits I'm busy with. But yeah, let me just quickly go up here and just find a nice studio backdrop. We're not even talking about natural backgrounds. Here's a very good example as well, how the background can be so damn distracting. So for this shoot with Kayla, and I think this is Henny sitting here, by the way, Hendrik Mulder. So this is his shot. But when you look at the original picture and you look at this backdrop, and I just reset the shot to its original edit, you see we shot this against the blue backdrop. But understanding color, I knew there's no blue or turquoise or teal in a skin. In editing, I can target that color and change it to whatever other color I want. So here you can see how light and color, and then finally how light and color affects the background. So remember, I was saying that, so both when you are using light on the subject, you are using color on the subject for styling, picking the person's shirt, picking the person's wardrobe, because you want a particular color to convey a particular feeling in the shot. You should always consider the color of the backdrop as well. And Rob, that's my gripe with many of us. We just so much in love with black and white. The fact that we forget the power of color to bring together a picture and to even give me a better black and white conversion. And sometimes that we don't appreciate that a color image is sometimes just better because there's a certain feeling that the color convey that you don't even pick up in the black and white. So I hope that makes sense to you guys all, that because you do get people who are just loosely converting everything to black and white because they like black and white. And then they actually, and this, by the way, was a beige backdrop where we obviously vignetted the backdrop and where you put little light on the backdrop. And if you look at, for example, at some of my shots here, that there was the original, and we just put a little bit of color into that backdrop, or a little bit of light into that backdrop to create a bit of a pop. So when you're out shooting, and when you decide how you are going to photograph somebody, make a decision. What lighting am I going to use to convey a specific look and feel? And then secondly, what colors am I going to use? And even if you're going to shoot a black and white, be very, very effective in communicating with your client the type of colors you want them to wear. Because the mistake we sometimes make is we think, well, I'm going to turn this into a black and white, but not realizing that my black and white. So here is a good a great picture of how we use a beige backdrop with a bit of a color gel, give it a slight pop. And when you look at some of these more neutral shots where you see how the beige complements the person, and there's that sense of tranquility, and it's soft on the eyes when you are using like a beige on the backdrop. Over here, I've added this in post. I don't particularly like it, but this is just, I wanted to create something slightly different, and I really don't like the crop. So I would like to come in a little bit more on the shoulders and make the arms seem a little bit slimmer. And yeah, and this was just a simple headshot, you know. And so the point is, think of the color, the light on your subject, the light on your background, the color on your subject, and the color on your background, or the color in the background, in other words. I hope that makes sense, guys. Remember, this is photography 101. So the other important aspect is that is the warmth or the coolness of the photo. So when we look at a black and white edit, so something I bet many of you guys are using, and I did speak about it. I often speak about that. But when you look at a black and white picture like this is a very masculine shot. And so you can just change the complete look and feel by using either warm colors or cool colors. So what would you guys suggest will be a great addition? Should I add warmth or cool to this picture?
I feel like a little bit of gold colors would help it have more feeling to it.
So why wouldn't a cool color add feeling as well? Because what colors? So when you are working with black and white, and you're bringing in a cool color, you add a sense of masculinity often, and very often a warmer color has a sense of warmth and romance to it, which I agree with you. But I'm just going to pop a little bit of blue into this shot here. So I'm going to add like a very soft blue. And in this picture, we're going to add just a bit of a soft warmth in the shadows, just to show you guys the difference and how differently they will read. So I'm just going to put them next to each other. Again, this is now out for the jury. You guys can tell me what was it you prefer.
I prefer the gold colors. It just feels more masculine and feels like it fits the setting of the photo.
Okay, who else? Guys, come on. This is a discussion, by the way, and particularly for the mentees.
Definitely the one on the right for me.
The cooler one.
I'm going to go with the cooler one. I think it just adds something. The warmer one looks, yeah, sorry, that's just the other cooler one is better.
So you're not a big sepia fan, Rob?
No, you can make the one on the right even darker if you want. I don't mind. You know that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is something we've learned over the years, and I get it. But I have seen portraits that I have taken that just reads better in warm colors because it just suits that portrait. And why are we afraid to? Why do we put everything in a mold for us? So when Amune and I was researching what canvas to buy for, we're buying a fine art canvas for the studio, a big canvas. And so we were debating what colors should we paint it. I love green because it's one of my favorite colors when I convert to black and white, and even for skin tone, for color images. So I love black and white. I love green. But I was just shocked. A warmer fine art textured backdrop, how much more it's being used than the cooler ones. So it's first warm and then green. So that's kind of the ranking order of of how most photographers are using canvas backdrops. So I was quite surprised to see that. But the point is, you have that option, even if you go black and white, to warm up the picture, to cool it down, to add. So I like cooler colors generally. So if you look at a lot of the portraits I do, there's always a bit of blue somewhere in the shadow, but there's a nice balance here from his warm skin tone versus the slightly, and it's such the background has such a subtle blue that a lot of photographers won't even realize it's a little bit of blue in there. And so when you go with a picture like this, and this is a very good example. I mean, this one is unedited, but I chose this for the color palette because you have this very striking blue color. So would warmer color damage this photo? Let's have a look. Let's just see. If we warm it up a little bit, suddenly the picture has a little bit more of a feel to it. And you see, the moment I added a bit of warmth to the shadows, the background suddenly became slightly warmer. But it's beautifully balanced against these blue clothes, against his blue denim and his blue shirt. And then obviously complemented by his blazer. So the point is, guys, do not be afraid to experiment with color. Do not be afraid to go against your grain and try colors. When I study the work of Paolo Roversi, very often he works with a warm color palette. Very often he works with a cool color palette. And every time I look at his work, I just think to myself, you know what? This guy really knows what he wants. And even for some of his more muted type of work, there's very often that play. Some of my favorite shots of him has a warm color palette, others has a cool color palette. Don't bog yourself down by choosing what you like and then just stick with it because you're not willing to learn or willing to understand. And I would say, if there's a photographer that I can say everybody should study, is the great Danie Leibowitz, because in my opinion, her work is so diverse and so she's got such a wide spread of work, from editorial to fine art to documentary to candidates to high fashion to subtle to powerful to from almost casual compositions to very deliberate formal compositions. And I just get blown away with her depth. And I know we all have our favorite photographers. And during my preparation for the mentorship program, just the one photographer that rocked my boat the most was probably Danie Leibowitz. Now, you can't be Danie Leibowitz because Danie Leibowitz isn't exactly like Steve McCurry, who uses Kodachrome and the Kodachrome colors. She's just too diverse. But the fact is that every time I look at a photo, sometimes with a warm tone, sometimes with a cool tone, I just feel that she knew exactly how to process this image to make this image. And I think part of my goal for this mentorship program is obviously going to install a style and help you guys find a style. But it's also to let you open yourself up to other opportunities that you wouldn't even have considered because you decided early on, well, I just don't like warm colors because it's too romantic. It's too this for me. It's too that for me. And then when you look at some of the work of the great masters and you realize, oh, there's so much warmth in this picture, but there's so much feeling in there. I can live with this. I think this is really well executed. And so the point is, you go from high key shot like this to a low key picture, and these are obviously already edited. The point is light determines this. These two pictures read very differently, but why doesn't this picture read as well as it could? Can I just quickly ask you guys, why do you think this picture doesn't convey exactly the opposite of this image? If I put these two together next to each other, they are definitely opposites. Am I right? Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Is this going to be like this always for me with you? Are we going to have chats or are you going to let me do all the talking?
I'm gonna suck up to Danie and say he's right. The reason I think they're opposites is because the one gives off a warmer feeling and a less strict feeling, and that there's leeway in the photo. The other one gives down a sense of, listen here, you have to listen to me. It's strict, it's disciplinary. That's what it's giving to me.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but the one is low key and the other one is high key. That's very much when you look at the Instagram here, you see it's a high key backdrop, and when you look at high key composition or exposure, when you look at this picture, you see it's completely low key. But I want to make a point. What do you think would have made these exact opposites? They're definitely opposites, but what would have put them in stark contrast? Come on, guys.
If
Read
the
my
woman in the left photo was wearing more of a white on white color.
I think you're looking too deep, Lucius. Quickly read my definition.
Okay.
Okay. Guys, what about if she was smiling on this picture on the left-hand side? So Jacques already said, well done, Jacques. You put it out just as I said it. You took the bait and you ran with it. What about if she was smiling? What about if it was a happy photo and not stock? So can you see how all these elements come together? So if I wanted to create contrast between these two shots, and by the way, I do have friendly smiling shots of her, but I deliberately chose these two because I wanted to test you guys. I wanted you to be able to pick up, but what's the big difference between the one and the others? So Rob, you're doing, for example, a show to a person and you're putting together a collection. Sorry, you're putting together a collection for a person you photographed. What will be an effective way to put together that collection if you're curating it and you decide what order the picture should be, is to put the one with the smile next to the one with the stark low-key contrast. And suddenly, without people knowing, they just subtly realize, because the stark picture here and the stark expression will make the friendly big smile seem friendlier, and the friendly expression will make the other pictures seem starker. Hope you guys get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it makes sense. I didn't sort of look at it like that, to be honest with you, but now that you've explained it a little bit more, that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, so in other words, we feel, okay, you said it yourself. Sometimes you do beauty photography, it's paint by numbers. You go home and you feel, I wanted to create another Peter Lindbergh shot. I never got my Peter Lindbergh shot today. Because Peter Lindbergh is a fashion photographer that has this ability to capture mood and feel in his work. That's crazy when you look at his work.
That's just so candid. And it still looks posed. It's ridiculous.
It's posed, yet there's something.
It candid, yeah, absolutely. I've got his book and it's incredible. You ever look at the work that he's done for all the fashion houses. It's incredible. And
his work is raw and sensual, and he doesn't go with all these tricks I'm teaching you guys on color. Perhaps he does. I don't know his process in full. I don't know that well. But the point is, you have the ability through juxtaposition to juxtapose pictures next to each other that don't belong to each other. This is a picture that, for example, this is a good edit, but I mean, I could edit this much more moodier. But when you look at the other one with a little dress, remember, they are just so opposite. And you see, as a photographer, and particularly if you want to be a great portrait photographer, you have to be versatile, I think, at first, to capture the picture on the left and to capture the picture on the right-hand side as well, based on what your client, especially if you want to earn money from photography. But at some point, you might start your own style and it might become your thing, and that's ideally where you want to move. But the point is, as you grow and progress as a photographer, what hinders us to be more versatile? What prevents us from trying things that we never tried because we should experiment, I think. When you look at these 3 shots of this dude here, and I think some of them are student pictures. So, I mean, they like really cool. They simple. They are not over edited. Obviously, I can add a little bit more contrast. I can do one or two things with color. But the fact is, they are all low key. They're all beautifully lit. That short lighting on this side of the face, the muscles, the tones in his muscles, how it's just being brought out by the light we've used, and that background light adds depth. And we look at these pictures and we think, okay, but all my work should look like this. And then we don't get to a point where sometimes you think, well, I want to do a rather different kind of vibe. For example, I want to do this. So that's a very good example of two extreme opposites. And the one on the left makes a picture on the one stronger. So we go for light and color to create mood, and then composition. How do the placement of our subject? So that's something where I feel most of us are lacking. And we're talking portrait photography here. With one of my future sessions, I'm going to talk about outdoor compositions and about how using natural elements in the frame to add to your compositions. But a simple composition like this, where you leave a little bit more headspace on top, adds. Whereas when you look at this picture on the other side, that tight composition brings me to a point where I'm really connecting to a person. So this brings me to another aspect I would like you guys to write down. Remember, I'm not covering composition in depth. There's no way I can. But I want to say, how do you isolate an expression? What's the most common tool you will use to isolate an expression?
Zoom and crop.
You said that.
Was
Because
me.
I can't see who's talking because my flippin' Zoom screen is so dear Makar. So I assume it's Danie that you said that.
It was me.
Yeah, but 100%. The reason why I often tell my students, listen, crop in tighter. When you have a great expression, zoom in tighter and isolate that expression and get rid of all the other junk. Now, obviously, this picture I'll edit slightly more like that one when it goes into my portfolio, because I'm busy putting my business portfolio together, and I'm looking for some strong masculine shots. And right behind him, I'll add a slight vignette over here around his head, and I'll darken the background a little bit to isolate his expression even more. And the way I'll do that would be something like this. And I'm just talking you guys through some basic tools we use to isolate things, because here the gray is really working. It's neutral. His expression is so powerful, it doesn't bother us. But if I just go into Lightroom and I select the background, I want to show you guys how easy it is to just change with a simple composition in editing. So here I'm changing the backdrop, just making it slightly darker. I don't want to make it too bright, too dark. There we go. And then I'm going to add a radial filter just behind his head, holding my shift button so that radial filter will be perfectly round. So I'm going to add to actually push about 2 stops of light. No, that's too much. About 1.2 stops of light in. And I put it right here. I just want the one shoulder to stand slightly out. So I'm going to put a little bit more off center and swing it around like this. And then I say intersect mask with background. And very often this can go wrong if there is fine hair details or fine clothing details on the edge. And I'm going to subtract the subject as well, just to make sure that Lightroom does a slightly better read of this. And now on this background layer, I'm just going to add a little bit of slight cooler tone down there. Just put a slight bit of, no, it's not going to help to get my temperature. I have to add real color and just dump it slightly. Now I feel the color becomes too strong. It takes away. You see how the color now becomes an element on its own, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So yeah, that was my mistake. So don't put color, because the color takes away from that expression. But just by slightly zooming in, crop tighter, even tighter than this. So I'm going to go even tighter. And then adding that little bit of a vignette and cropping into the shoulders, because it's got like really broad shoulders. And I think it might distract a little bit from the facial expression, but there we go. Easy way to say, hey, look at my subject. And the hands is slight off color. It's just his hands was definitely a different color. And you can see that here I've added a little bit of, I'm going to brighten those knuckles a little bit. Put a little bit of, I did put quite a bit of clarity in there in the hand already, because the hand was out of focus and too soft to my liking. But there we have a very nice shot using that vignette, create the depth in the background. Rob, I know you sometimes use the background similar. I think I've seen you use this technique, or we typically shoot it like that, which is always better. But anyone here who ever thought about popping your background a little bit by just putting a slight highlight, brightening the background around the shoulders and the heads to just create that extra bit of separation? It's a great technique for elegant portraits.
Yeah, I always feel it's better to shoot it in studio. I'd rather do it in camera than post. But be that as it may, we can always fix it in post. But I mean, we shoot often with a little bit of a pop in the background in studio.
Yeah, I mean that's something we do almost with every studio workshop. But sometimes I shoot against against the white backdrop, and I switch off the background light so that my background becomes gray. And then afterwards, I decide I wanted to pop this a little bit. Then you have that advantage that you can always pop a part of that in the backdrop. Yeah. Here's a good example of where the picture actually works. So this one is not edited the way it should. So just maybe find its real brother, the edited version. This is quite dark and ominous, and you can see that I've actually, so this is a kind of a nice shot. But if you look at the expression there versus the expression here and the use of backdrop, so why would I choose a dramatic backdrop like on the left-hand side if I'm shooting the picture on the right-hand side? So I'm still talking about background and then framing your pictures for composition and getting the framing right. This is so important that you guys understand that when you are creating, whether in post, whether in shooting, you would want to think about every single one of these elements when you are photographing. And I think it's a lot of photographers don't realize that portrait photography is, you've got a very simple recipe. And if you use this recipe and you do it continually right, and you experiment with different techniques, you will eventually just come out on top, and you'll be a great portrait photographer. If you're willing to experiment to the point where eventually you say, well, this has become my style. If I look at, I know last week I spoke about Nolan Lister's work in the mentorship class, and we looked at all those other photographers, and I said to everybody, but the one guy who blows me away is Nolan. And I spoke about Annie Leibovitz as well, and how deeply affected I am when I look at her pictures, because she just has this ability as a storyteller to tell stories and to create mood. And when you look at her editing, it's very deliberate, it's very intentional. She sometimes uses a lot of green in her photographs. People don't realize it. And then a lot of her fine artwork has a slightly warmer tone to it. Fine art portraiture, black and white, that I've seen. And sorry, not black and white. She often shoots with a slightly warmer backdrop. And the moment you start studying these photographers and you know how incredibly intelligent they are and how well they understand their craft, we realize how little we know. And so composition is the placement of your subject. Where do you place your subject? So in a picture like this, for example, we use the Brenner method. I used the handheld panorama. In other words, I shot one part, moved the lens to get the whole studio in using a long lens. And you always want to think about your composition. Very simple example of composition here, where I deliberately kept this bright line in that was shot with using the gobos. And what's pretty cool about this is I think everything adds to this. It adds to having this subject right in the middle. But what would you say is the most powerful composition? If you want to frame a person in the frame, what would you say is the most powerful way to frame a person and make a person seem very powerful?
Make them seem powerful.
More powerful.
Lower. I would shoot from lower. I wouldn't shoot straight on.
Shoot from lower?
Yeah. Makes them look bigger.
Okay, and what else?
Straight on, not sideways. So not like this. I would shoot them front on.
In other words, him facing you, in other words.
Yeah, facing me directly, yeah. Maybe slightly off to the side, slightly, but not like that.
Okay.
Like to me, he's looking elsewhere. There's something else that he's interested in. He's not interested in me.
I get what you're saying, but you can see my low vantage point. Is that right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
One of the big mistakes we make is sometimes not using the good old 16:9 crop and putting the person exactly in the center. And so when you study all the great cinematographers, and we know about them, they very often put the subject right in the middle. And you know how wrongly we are taught. I don't have a single example here where I do have that connection. But again, when you study the great cinematographers, they sometimes use a 16:9 crop and put this person right in the center and have them look slightly down at you, shooting them from slightly lower vantage point. But that is something that we very often forget. It's okay with portrait photographers, because remember, I'm talking composition, to put the subject in the middle. So if I just look at some of my favorite portraits here by for example, the great Peter Lindbergh. And those are pictures that you guys know very well. So that's exactly what Rosalie and the rest of you guys said. So when you look at this, he's photographing Nicole Kidman from slightly lower vantage point, making her look powerful. Next photograph, he shoots her from slightly higher up. The body language changes, the expression, the body language. So the pose changes. So the pose here versus the pose here suddenly introduces a slight hint of vulnerability. And then when you compare them, the picture on the right-hand side definitely seems slightly more vulnerable because she was shot from the top. She's looking up, but she's got such a powerful gaze. I don't think it's taking away from her. But the wonder of somebody like Peter Lindbergh and somebody like Albert Watson as well, which I also enjoy Albert Watson a lot, is the fact that their pictures are so simple. But they capture emotion together with using the tools that we discussed. So the final culmination of any good portrait, obviously, pose. Is this a typical fashion pose, the picture on the left-hand side? No. This wrist, by the way, that's broken here, that turn of the wrist, that's a very good way to shoot it. If you kept the wrist straighter, the picture wouldn't have had this much impact, and that slightly turned wrist actually adds you so much value to it. It's a great picture. But when you compare these two shots, it's a photographer who deliberately shot these pictures based on what he felt at the time. They're not storybook poses. They're not the best fashion poses I have seen. They're not Stephen Meisel's avant-garde posing, or Tim Walker, Paolo Roversi, or Sarah Moon's brilliant, playful kind of poses, not as feminine, not nearly, but he connects with the soul. And so the final element in any portrait is, after posing, is capture an expression that goes with the rest. This is one of my favorite shots, and I know I've spoken quite a lot about this picture in the past, but there's a picture of Madonna where she seems vulnerable, soft eyes. It's such a simple but eloquent composition. It's incredible. And so you do get those photographers who are able to capture expression more than anything. And talking about expression, I want to show you guys my favorite, or one of my favorite photographers. And I think she just goes exactly on the opposite side. And now you're going to tell me whether her work is less expressive or whether her work is just as expressive, but just expressing something differently. And so, Rob, would you say you have the ability to capture femininity? Sorry, I'm putting you out there for everybody.
It's not a problem. I think so. Yeah. Yes. I would say I think I do, yeah.
Okay. Anta, what's your take on Peter Lindbergh's photography? Do you like it?
Yes.
It's obviously...
That's what I want to do in my photography. I want to capture not just the outer beauty, it's that inner look in the eye.
Yeah, there's that connection. His pictures are raw, and he's a female. Models always look very powerful. They definitely don't look emancipated. They look powerful. And it's something that he's known about. You know, with all my research about Peter Lindbergh, he has this ability to convey women as powerful beings. And I mean, obviously, Nicole Kidman brings a lot to a shoot. I mean, you do shoot a celebrity that's confident, that knows how to portray themselves in front of the camera. But even that picture of Madonna, where he just went the opposite, where she looks vulnerable, you know, it just, for me, that thing, that pose together with the expression, the pose in both these shots, the two pictures of Peter Lindbergh that I showed you, the poses weren't like perfect model storytelling poses, but those expressions overpowered the pose. And so pose is super important. When you do general photography, I mean, a simple shot like this, where she rests on a hand, doesn't really lie on the hand, where you can see, you know, a very simple pose, you know, leaning with her head on the side. This is a very simple, not necessarily a fashion pose, very powerful pose over here for a guy. I still have to edit this one. And if you look at these three different expressions, you know, the hands play such a big role in these shots. But it's the expression that matters. And obviously, I have a plan with these three shots in this. I'm going to change the sequence slightly, the way we're going to present them. But I'm busy just going through some of my older work and busy looking at some of the work I have done that I felt. I've looked over this picture. I have a whole, probably about 600 portraits already in a separate collection that I earmarked to go through and do a final selection from them for my new portfolio, because I promised myself that very early on in the mentorship program, I'll have my at least, you know, a portfolio ready with some of my work. And because I just neglected my portrait portfolio over the last couple of years. And the point is this expression, that expression, I mean, she's not looking as pretty, for example, as that. Obviously, there's a bit of a high-end retouching, you know, almost overcooked, but there's a reason for that kind of shot. But you can see that with all these shots, the expressions matter. They talk to us. They, even the smile, it brings something to us. This guy is just at such a presence. I absolutely enjoyed shooting him, and he actually came with his daughter, and she just said, "Would you mind taking a couple of pictures of my parents as well with my shoot?" And I said, "Of course." And they didn't even come dressed for the occasion. They just arrived with her to support her. And before they realized I was pushing up, I put them in there. And I obviously also re-editing this shot for my latest. And even our garden guy, who also is our studio guy. You know, these shots are straight out of camera now. I have done some really nice edits. This is our good friend Cliff. Rob will remember him very well with one of the shoots we had. He's also a photographer and also a jazz musician, a very cool dude, got quite a nice present. And I just thought, well, I just want to look at some of these pictures again. So these are just a quick couple of selections I've done based on different outcomes I want from it. But the thing is, if you're going to capture expression, you have to always work with a pose first. You have to become eloquent in posing. So I really don't struggle with male posing. I think male posing comes fairly simple to me, because I would sometimes sit and think about life, like this picture of Sakiwe is also here. I saw Sakiwe here earlier, and I hope he's still here. Yeah. And also put this one aside, Sakiwe one, because I want to show you another edit I'm going to try on this for your program. And he looks a little bit like, maybe, I hope you're not going to get offended, but he looks a little bit like Mandela. There's definitely a very strong resemblance, and he's such a photogenic guy, and he's also doing the mentorship program. And I've got another nice picture of him that I've already edited, you know, which I think I sent you already. But yeah, there's such a nice lived-in face. And this picture that we shot with one of the other workshops of Piet, Rita's husband. She's one of our studio partners, and the lighting is absolutely beautiful and simple. And I asked him, "Would you mind bringing, you know, get a denim shirt?" Because he said, "Well, I only have T-shirts, and sometimes I do like having more texture, and so this will also be equally great as a black and white, if you guys can see. It's very nice, and obviously you want to put a little bit more clarity in when you do it black and white, but you also don't want to overdo it. You know, you don't want to add extra years to the guy. You just want to add maybe 5 years, but not 15. And so guys, remember, all of this comes together. You start with deciding what is it I want to shoot. So you decide, I'm photographing a person's character or a personality, character, or features. So if it's features, it's for beauty photography. If it's for fashion, it's features related. It's the superficial part of it, which doesn't mean it shouldn't have mood. So when we do our beauty edits and our beauty editing, at least it should convey some feeling. And with that, I'm saying the final way that you create mood. And then obviously it's light and color. I explained that in depth with you guys. Then it's bringing in, so light, color, then the background. You can't really separate the background from the light. So create extra depth in your backgrounds. When you're shooting in the outdoors, which I'm not covering today, then frame the subject, use framing, use doorways, use structures in the distance to frame the subject. Use textures, use walls, use reflections to create extra depth by choosing a background that will help you in creating depth and not take away from your subject. Don't let the background overwhelm your subject. Think carefully of the color of your background, because if it's an opposite color as the colors the person's wearing or the colors in the person's face, it means you can target those colors more effectively afterwards. Or if you do use a complementary or not a similar backdrop, then use that similar backdrop because you want to create a soft analogous kind of look. You want to create color harmony. So always think of your background as just as important as the others. But if you figured out your lighting and you figured out the colors, then obviously background can't be neglected. If your background fails, your picture fails. I've said that often in the classes. And then through composition, which we're not really going in depth here. You can see I shot Piet slightly from a lower vantage point. And over here, we shot this picture from slightly higher. And this one definitely from higher up. There's a beautiful way it carries through. And I shot Amanda here from slightly higher up as well. It doesn't take away from it. And here she is shot level up, you know. And so, you know, really think about when you bring the camera to your eye, what vantage point you're going to use, what focal length you're going to use. And what we learned from Platon's work, and I don't know if you saw the Pinterest board I posted on headshots for the mentees, but if you just look how Platon uses those elaborate, exaggerated perspective using a wide angle lens close up, straight into a person's face, and how much more powerful these pictures read. And if you think of background and composition, again, think of the lens you're using. If you use a longer lens, you compress the backdrop, you keep all the clutter out of a busy backdrop. And if you use a wide angle lens, then you have to carefully select a cleaner backdrop or choose a scenic backdrop for a more epic theme. But I hope you guys get what I'm trying to say. The single definition I'm giving you guys today, that single definition actually shows you the whole process of portrait photography. And then through posing, and then finally expression. And you saw with those pictures of Peter Lundberg, how expressions carry the picture away. Now, this brings me to another thing. Which of you, and Rob, here, I'm not going to pick on you all the time. I'll ask somebody else. If I can be honest with you guys, which of you think you have the ability to talk the person you're shooting into a particular expression? And to be able to identify what a good expression is. Which of you feel, no, I'm not there? Just be honest with me.
I just think I'm not there yet.
Okay, thank you, Lucius. Which of the other guys
yet.
feel that you're really good? Okay, Babs, so there's a second honest one. Jock says not.
I'm not there yet. I don't know. I think I prefer happy. I always push people to the happy side.
But that's also like a feeling.
A happy expression. And I think I need to be able to get all moods, you know, and be able to express the same person in different ways.
Yeah, and you know, one of the big mistakes we make, guys, we always think that an expression should be like Peter Lundberg. We always think, okay, I need to do Peter Lundberg expressions, but we don't think that ethereal and angelic is another form of expression. And I just want to jump here quickly to my Pinterest. And yes, see, guys, I'm struggling with this I don't know what's wrong. Sean has to look at my computer. I click on something and then I wait. So if I go quiet for like 5 or 6 seconds, it's not that I don't know what to say. It's I'm trying to figure out, I can't really do two things at once. I'm trying. The other day, I got it right to take a sip of my coffee and press the remote control at the same time. And Amanda was very impressed with me, the fact that I can multitask.
Oh, you see, we can multitask. You see, it's not impossible. I'm going to tell Heidi that.
Yeah, you must tell her that you can press the remote control and take a sip of your whiskey same time.
Absolutely.
I think we can multitask, Danie. It's just a point of we can multitask of being calm and pushing on our women's buttons.
Wow.
Lucius, I can see you're very inexperienced. I won't say it loud in this class.
I know I'm inexperienced, don't worry.
So I'm going to just show you.
When you get a gap, you must look at Lee Jeffries. If you want to look at sort of those 35 mil black and white expressions.
I know his work. I know his work. I actually like his work. It's not particularly what I want to attain to, but he's brilliant in that. And Lee Jeffries is really good in what he does.
Nice, fantastic. So he does a lot of the work for Metallica, and I'm a big Metallica fan, so I've sort of followed him big time. But I mean, he did all of their album covers and all of their album photos of the band, and it's incredible stuff.
I'm trying just to get here on my Pinterest, guys. I should have prepared, but with me restarting my computer was such a gemors. Damn Zoom screen's jumping.
While you're directing your screen and trying to reflect on what you are telling us today, which is quite interesting. So, are you actually saying with this whole portraiture work, it's more about directing emotion and energy to the subject?
Say again.
I'm not trying to summarize what you've been telling us, but what I'm learning from you today is that with portraiture, it's less about directing face, asking person to smile. It's about more directing emotion and energy.
Yeah, and you don't direct it. You extract it from the person by interacting and talking the person through. And with the 50 headshots that you guys have to do, hopefully you'll get that. And with our first shoot, where we're going to have our first shoot now as a group, I will do a very short demo. That's on my to-do list, on sitting just with one person and calmly talk the person through different expressions and emotions and evoking emotion. You don't only direct them, because directing means you tell them, but as a photographer, you evoke it. You pull the right, you push the right buttons. Like the great picture of Yusuf Karsh, who walked up to Churchill and he pulled the cigar from his hand, from his mouth,
Yeah, that's directing might be part in my English there. But sometimes when I do portraiture for serious people or important people, I would say, think about a decision that changed your life, because I'm trying to find something or say something. Okay, let's say you've just closed the biggest deal of your career, because I'm trying to find something, but maybe directing is the wrong word to use.
You are evoking, you're doing a conversation with them, and you're 100% right. But sometimes we complicate it in the sense of that we're trying too hard. You're trying to tap into emotions that they don't necessarily have, because maybe it's too deep for them, if you get what I'm saying. Maybe they never had a great business deal and they don't have the emotion that goes with that. They're just ordinary people. But when so very often I would sit and I would tell the person, okay, sit like this. I really like this. Tell me a little bit about you. Are you married? So it's one of the first things. Normally before the shoot start, I would know if the person married, how many kids they have. I would ask them about their kids. I'll ask them about something that's familiar to them. Typically something that's close to home, like family members. I find that normally helps. If it's an artist, it's their work, What is it that you like about your work? You just get them to open up and talk to you. It's not that you use that to evoke emotion. Then I have the person, I said, would you mind sitting with your hands like this? Look a little bit sideways, just close your eyes. And then I steer them to look contemplative and steer into a direction. And then I would ask a question. I'll continue talking. And then at one stage, they'll start talking back to you. And then sometimes there's that pause after they've answered a question, or after you've engaged with them, and that pause is very often the shot where you get the nice character shots. So it's really about, I would say, entering into conversation. Platon is well known for the fact that he would do the same. He when he took those pictures of Putin, I think Putin is a Beatles fan, and he asked him about the Beatles and just having that connection point. So he would always do a little bit of research about the person he's photographing to have what we call in Afrikaans 'n aanknopingspunt, a conversation starter. Just to get the conversation going, and from there onwards. But different photographers have different techniques, a keyword. But very often for me, I try to steer away from giving them too abstract thoughts, where they have to be too abstract or think about something that didn't really occur with them. I try to make it too deep. So I keep it more superficial. I keep it more based on family and what makes them happy. And so if you say, what's your greatest achievement? Some people have the ability to give you an expression to go with that. Others just don't have. So sometimes you kind of work that expression. You work into that to get the expression you want without trying to be too deep. But that's my personal feeling. And I think the important thing is to sometimes let people just sit and be themselves and talk to them and watch them through the lens. Watch them until you see there's something I like. I don't know about many of you guys who's been doing portrait photography. I know some of you has been doing portrait photography for some time, but very often I miss it because, and then I said to the person, that's what you did now. Just do it again. Because I just missed this. I missed this important moment. And that's why you should be ready. Your camera settings should be dialed in. Your lighting should be right. You should have the person turn towards the light the way you want to light them. You should make sure that everything is in line. The pose is line, because from the pose comes the expression. And what does it help if you have a great expression but a bad pose? Like the shoulders slumping. Or what does it help you have a great pose but a bad expression? So you can't also separate that from one another as well. And I think it's for certain when I shoot clients, like today I've booked a client for a 2-hour shoot. She's a psychologist. She needs new business portfolio for her branding. She's upgrading her website. And my selling point to her was that, and I know it's not only a selling point, I know it's the truth, but I told her, listen, you'll get a minimum of 60 pictures from me for that 1.5 hour shoot, edited, and these pictures will carry you for years to come. And I told her we're going to shoot 3 different backdrops, 3 different settings. We're going to go formal, semi-formal, or smart casual rather, and then we're going to go informal, casual wear. Different type of backdrops, different type of expressions for each. And when you do a shoot like that, you really don't have hours, because you also have to be productive. You have to make money. Otherwise, what is going to help you? But I'm trying to, within that 1.5 hour period, connect with the person right in the beginning, being friendly, smile to them, encourage if they're doing something right, tell them they're looking great in front of the camera, which builds confidence, because confidence is the one thing that will show in the expression. If you don't get them to be confident, if you don't boost their confidence, and there's one thing we often do and I used to do that a lot, where I'd look at my picture and I would say, it doesn't work. Not referring to the person, but referring to my bad lighting or my bad pose or my bad direction, meaning I failed. But when I say it doesn't work, immediately the person or your subject feels it and they attract it, and then you miss the shot. So I would just say, no, yes, I'm really struggling with my lighting today. You're actually posing very elegantly, but I just don't get it. I need to fix my lighting. And I never tell the client, I tell them, okay, straighten up, posture. I'm very direct when it comes to that things, but I will never tell them that that's difficult to photograph them. Because you don't want to put that pressure on them. It's your job, whether it's difficult or not. Bobs was with me the other day when we shot 7 executives from a big company. And Bobs, you probably realized that the CEO of the company was the most difficult to shoot. I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't notice, Danie.
Did you notice?
No, I didn't. But I did notice that he was not as talkative as the others.
Yeah,
So,
and he's a very powerful man. He's very intelligent, but he just doesn't like the camera. I could see it. And in the pictures, I had to work with him primarily, and the others around him kind of just fell into place. But it was difficult. And you know what? I need another session with him one-on-one, and it will no longer be a problem. But in that group setting where you walk in and there's 7 executives that you have to take a group shot and then quick individual for each, there's no time to really think. But I did my best. I made jokes. I told them about how bad a dancer I am, that I don't have rhythm. You always joke a little bit about myself, and then get them to understand I'm just a normal person photographing them. And I tell them what looks great. Just, you've got great hair, you've got this, you've got that. So you kind of build their confidence that way. But I'll send you the pictures. I'm done editing. They received it this morning. But guys, the other photographer, I'm going to show you a photographer who's really been my favorite for many, many years, together with Paolo Roversi. And this is the great Sarah Moon. Now, her pictures are just so different than, for example, if we look at, and I just want to open another one here in Pinterest. And if you look at the work of, for example, Peter Lindbergh, I'm going to show you 2 very opposite kind of forms of photography. So how different are these? This is very sensual sometimes, very sexy. Sometimes, let's go for Stephen Meisel as well. I can just open. It won't open. But I mean, this is the great Peter Lindbergh. But the point I want to make, these pictures, can you see with Sarah Moon the nuances, the femininity? And this isn't in Lindbergh's work. But can you see, that's, by the way, that's definitely a Paolo Roversi. That's not a Sarah Moon. By the way, a lot of people get confused with them. I know they work fairly well. And if you go for Paolo Roversi, but what's the one thing that you guys pick up in all these shots? Come on. Moenie my hart breek nie.
I think they
Rosalie says softness.
looking at them. You feel something.
Ek kan jou nie hoor nie. Jy moet bietjie nader aan jou mic sit.
Probeer uit, onthou.
Yes.
Ja, nee, ek sê net hulle evoke emotion in 'n mens. Jy kan nie help om iets te voel as jy na hulle kyk nie.
Yeah, so this is Albert Watson that I spoke to you about. Do you know his work, Rob? Jock?
Rob and Jock had to go. They left a message in the chat.
Okay. So when you look at these ethereal vibes, it's exactly like Anta saying this mood. How does Paolo Roversi get mood? Quick one. He's known for that. I've quoted him often. I studied this guy probably more than most other photographers I studied. It's these long exposures create a different feeling to these pictures, but at the same time, it is just the way he poses people, the way he extracts expression. And you can see how confused people are between him and Sarah Moon. Very often you'll find Sarah Moon pictures in when you're doing a search on Roversi and vice versa. I know their work, so I would very often tell you, oh, that's a Paulo Roversi picture and that is a Sarah Moon picture. But just for interesting sake, who likes Paulo Roversi the most? And who likes Peter Lindbergh the most? So just type it out there in the chat. I would like to see. So romance, softness. So let's go back to our definition. Can you believe we spoke almost 2 hours on one definition? And I didn't even go in depth into everyone. By the way, I've prepared a very short tutorial based on that definition. This is Albert Watson. Same principle. Let's look at somebody that's a bit older, like, let's look at a storyteller like Yusuf Karsh. Let's look at Yusuf Karsh, who's a storyteller. This is one of his very iconic photographs. I actually have this in, I've made a print of this. I took the liberty of, but I have a book by Yusuf Karsh, 2 books actually by him. And what did I do now with my damn search? Come on. It's a very different vibe. So different vibe than, for example, Peter Lindbergh is a fashion photographer and Yusuf Karsh is a storyteller. Very known for his stories. Look at the cigarette. Look at the eloquent pose. His work is lovely. If you get to know the great Yusuf Karsh, you'll understand that sometimes I feel that Anna Leibovitz does the same type of storytelling photography, but it's just more modern because she has modern tools and better tools than the ones we have. Look at this. I don't know who took this. I have no idea who took this picture, but this is such a powerful photograph. Look at how they use texture in there. In that shot I showed you guys now. The same Christopher Walken here. But which is your favorite portrait of these 3 of him? Such an expressive face. Yeah, so it seems that Peter Lindbergh came out on top on the chat. Unfortunate. I like Paulo is my favorite, but Peter Lindbergh is right behind him. I can't. Look at these headshots, guys. For your headshots assignment. Definitely one of my favorite headshots. I have to pin this quickly in the mentorship board. I put this one right next to it. Sorry, I'm doing a little bit of housekeeping. I just cannot resist. Some of these I do have. Okay, allowed me to indulge myself a little bit. I mean, incredible. So can I ask from Anta, what is your greatest weakness, Anta, as a photographer? Portrait
I think
photographer.
posing and finding my style. Yeah, that's just my weakness.
Okay, so you're going to work harder on your posing and expression and finding your own style. Hello, Angelina. Thank you, Angelina. You just way too quiet as of late. I didn't even know half of the time you were here. But it's always like having you. Yeah. By the way, Angelina is one of the best assistants I've ever worked with. She's incredible.
But Danie, like you said, when we did the Lightroom course, that is going to help me a lot to, to find a style and to unify my look. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, so finding your style, posing. Henny, when you look at these photographers, do you think that it's unattainable to become a great portrait photographer?
Yo. My first instinct would be to say no. But you look at some of them and at the same time you think, yo, never. So yes and no.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. You want to be the best you can be.
Yeah.
And you definitely can't compete with some of these guys. Some of them, I can't. But as a portrait photographer, there's something I can attain to and I can work towards. And that's upping my game and not trying to compete with somebody else. And that, I think, is going to be one of the big mistakes any photographer can make, is trying to compete with another photographer and not competing against yourself.
Earlier today I was on Pinterest looking at Annie Leibovitz for photos, and I look at it and it looks so easy to set it up and do it. But then again, if it was, everybody would be Annie Leibovitz. So you kind of have to be realistic about it. Aspire to be as good as you can. That's it.
I think it's what you said there is such an important point. And I think Rosalie will agree with me. It perhaps is something you're still here, Rosalie. Anybody with any great person, a person that's great in what they're doing, makes whatever they do look easy. It comes natural to them. If you look at sportsmen, like F1 drivers, at rugby players, soccer players, athletes, but you don't know about the hours of hard work and as a photographer, hours and hours of growing your visual intelligence, shooting in studio, making mistakes. I wasn't happy with my shoot from last Thursday. I'm semi-happy. I saw at least 2 or 3 poses I could have done better that I felt, but I was under pressure and I was intimidated. Even though I've done quite a few similar shoots like that over the last couple of years. And there's one or twice that I thought, well, because I was under pressure, I didn't think the way. And next time when you go out, now I know I've made mistakes, because Lightroom is your greatest schoolmaster. And by seeing your mistakes in Lightroom, you realize, oh, I've made this mistake. Next time you're going to go out, you're not going to repeat all that same mistakes again. Because oh, I've made a small mistake here. You might make new mistakes then, but not the similar ones. And that's a point I want to make, is through shooting a lot, you guys can grow. Can I ask any person here, particularly from Kiamu, you've also been very quiet. Who's your favorite photographer here between Paulo Roversi and Peter Lindbergh? Oh, by the way, I do like Stephen Meisel as well. He's just as good. Just not, for me, just this guy, Peter Lindbergh is absolutely, this is an absolutely amazing photograph. I have this in a lot of I taught this picture in several of my classes about this very simple headshot. Clean, straightforward.
Yeah, I really think resonating more with Polo. Yeah.
Okay. Who else? That's a nice headshot. Let me add it to that. Rosalie, did you learn anything tonight?
So I kind of have a comment that I've just been thinking about. The concept of looking at the work that these people do, and I mean, I'm also like, you look at it and you think, you know, it's unattainable and it's unachievable, but it's kind of like to a certain extent comparing yourself with an Olympic athlete. You know, it's like you can also do the sport, like you said, but you know, we're not seeing where they started. We're just seeing where they ended up, and we are still we're still starting, and we're still on our way there. So it's actually, I'm meaning this is like words of encouragement to, you know, because, you know, sometimes, you know, with me, and I'm assuming other people as well, you kind of look and you feel a bit overwhelmed and you feel like, you know, I'm never going to get there, or this isn't something that I'll be able to achieve. And I mean, also, like, none of them are shooting it, like, you know, on their own with themselves, moving the lights and setting it up and stuff. They've all got like crews and like tons of people working on stuff. So,
but they all started moving their own lights. If you read the story
that's
about
the thing. That's
Peter
the thing.
Lindbergh,
But that's not
yeah.
what we're looking at now. What we're looking at now, you know, the products that we're looking at now is not that. So, I mean, yeah, I'm sort of, I don't really, my point is just, you know, like sometimes you kind of compare and you feel like, you know, for me, it can be like overwhelming and thinking I'll never get there. But I also think, you know, you must look where you are and look where they were, and, you know, understand that it's.
You're 100% right. But on the other hand as well, and I think we summarized it perfectly when they said to Danie, don't compete against anybody else but yourself. But I think what we should learn, and what I am trying to achieve with this mentorship program, is that photographers will start looking deeper than skin deep and realize the important aspect about all these photographers. The one thing that stands out is their ability to capture expression. And so I'm just going to bring up as a final point again my slide, my definition on portrait photography is capturing someone's personality, character, or features. You start with that by using light, color, background, composition, pose, and expression. And it's really great that I was talking a whole 2 hours on one definition. And I don't even think I scratched the surface. It's incredible. Because this definition, if you guys memorize this definition, I am putting it out for you guys early in the week. It will be available in the Portrait Mentorship portal as a complete tutorial. There will be a quiz, by the way, to go with it. But this is one of those definitions that I feel, or this is a definition that I feel, if you memorize it and you understand how the one aspect flows into the other, what comes first, what comes second, what comes third, and that some of them you can't really read separate. You can't read light and color and background separately. They become one when you shoot. But you have to consider all three individual elements. I hope that makes sense to everybody here. And then through composition, having a good eye, knowing when to use extra negative space, knowing when to do a center crop, when to do shoot from a low vantage point or shoot from a high vantage point. And then through the pose and the final culmination is expression. You can have everything right. But if your pose is weaker, but your expression is good, the picture will carry more value. If your pose is completely wrong and your expression is great, then you've missed a shot. But very often I've seen weak poses with strong expression, and the expression carries the picture. And that's the point, you know. This is really a time for us to be alive. It's a great time to be alive. We've got great tools. You can reverse engineer almost any photographer's style by taking it to AI, ask AI questions, ask AI to reverse engineer the photographer's style, what gear are they using, instead of going to do endless research on Google. And if you prompts are intelligent, and if you understand that AI makes mistakes because it sometimes takes just a shortcut, reads the first website it sees and take that for granted and doesn't double check itself. So you need to make it double check itself. And the thing is, for you guys, understand that your key to good photography and good portrait photography is all being locked up into this single definition I gave you tonight. And this to me is the real introduction to what your mentorship program is going to be about. Is before we look at different genres, before we look at directing and engaging your subject, to understand that you direct and engage because you want to capture expression and a good pose. And you have to be able to convey a pose, explain how to pose, and pose yourself sometimes.
Fantastic introduction, Danie. Thanks.
Yeah, this was like just barely covering the very basics, but I think it's important basics, everyone.